Welcome to today's global education discussion with educational leaders around the world. Today we have with us Alan November, who is one of the most interesting, thought-provoking leaders that we have that has been working in education technology for a very long time. And I've known and admired his work, and you will as well as we finish this discussion. What Alan and I are going to be talking about is how we make our students globally competitive. How do we prepare them for this world that they are going to be working in? I'm going to have Alan talk about his background because I think you will be as impressed as I have been all these years. So Alan, welcome. Would you just give us a real quick synopsis of all of your wonderful experience?
You bet, Jenny. By the way, it's a huge pleasure to catch up with you since your days at Cupertino.
That's true.
I started teaching on an island reform school in Boston Harbor. And I was a dorm counselor. I taught oceanography and algebra. And what fascinated me is my students asked for lots of extra help with oceanography and none in algebra. Two units that are of particular interest, Jenny: tides and currents and hypothermia, because those were the escape units on an island reform school. So I learned early in my career that anybody will learn if they're desperate. Since then, I, as you know, became a technology director in various places, including the high school where Ferris Bueller's Day Off was made, bunch on the East Coast, and this month I will be in Manila, Bangkok, Taipei, and Sydney.
Which obviously makes you very qualified for our topic today, where we talk about students in this globally competitive environment that they're all going to be working in. So, Alan, you know, you've had this vast array of experiences, including being a Christa McAuliffe Fellow. Isn't that true?
Yes, that's right.
That's
Thank
right.
you for mentioning that, Jenny.
Do you think we are preparing students for a globally competitive world?
I don't think we are, Jenny. I was looking at the PISA results, the TIMSS results last night in physics. We are last of European nations. Physics is the lifeblood entry point to engineering. And in fact, I'm working with an East Coast state, a big populous state, I won't mention by name. 2% of all students take AP physics in this state. And so it wouldn't be unusual, for example, I don't want to pick on physics more than necessary, but it would be possible in Europe to take the equivalent of 5 full years of physics compared to what a student might do here in 1 year. So our curriculum, in terms of creating engineering, our culture, which frankly I think spoon feeds kids too much, our expectation of assessment, I'm afraid, is not world-class. We have a lot of work to do, Jenny.
What kind of skills do you think students need to be globally competitive?
Well, I hope that, my idea is I hope we'll be good enough to criticize. I certainly hope anybody seeing this will generate some of their own. But I'll give you my 3 favorite ones.
Okay.
One is you have to deal with massive amounts of information well. I don't think there's any question that information is going to explode. Technology is going to get smaller and smaller. And it's not clear to me that we are teaching critical thinking with massive amounts of information, web literacy, and we can talk about that specific skill. Another skill is really to understand how to work with people around the world. It would not be unusual, this coming trip, as I travel across Asia and Australia, there will be an urgency on the part of educators to connect their students to an authentic audience around the world. That same sense of urgency really doesn't exist in this country.
No.
In fact, you almost have to convince people that the internet, as we're doing now, that one of the most powerful uses of the internet is global collaboration. And in that sense, global empathy is a key skill. The ability to understand the perspective of other people from different cultures. I think we should be doing that across the curriculum, starting in kindergarten all the way through. Every classroom, a global communication center. Third skill really depends on the first two. If you can deal with massive amounts of information well, and you can link that information to authentic audience and collaboration, the third skill empowers you to be self-directed. You do not need a boss to tell you what to do. That doesn't mean you're working alone. You're working interdependently, probably around the world, but you don't need the structure of work to tell you what to do hour by hour. And unfortunately, that's the part that will be the most difficult part to change in our culture, because hour by hour, we do tell children what to do. We have underestimated their ability to be self-directed.
You know, that's interesting because Stanford just did a study of the top 6 largest companies in technology. And what they found was 1 out of 5 people working in those companies have never met their boss. And 3 of them never will. So if you aren't self-directed,
yes,
then your ability to succeed and progress in a company is extremely diminished. So, excellent point.
I'm going to use that data in my talks, Jenny. Thank you.
There's a new one for you. So, is any country really doing a great job with this right now that you've seen?
Well, any of the... recently I was in Sweden and Denmark. And as you probably know, English is very common in the schools there. All children learn to speak English, at least around the cities where I was. Fluent, Jenny, just absolutely fluent. And as you probably know, China now educates more children who speak English than we have total population in the United States.
Yes.
And so these countries are not teaching their children English only for academic reasons. They see English as the route to the internet, to global opportunity. And so when you go visit countries like that, there is an eagerness on the part of teachers to connect their kids. Now, very often that's with Canada or Australia and not the U.S. So we're going to need to become part of this larger community so that our kids understand how to work with people around the world, too.
That is the truth. So when I think of the schools, in my experience, Alan, one of the constituents that is most important in making this transformation is the principal.
Yes.
You agree? Is that still the school leader?
I'm certain the research will show that the role of the principal will make or break any technology plan.
So
in fact, you can appreciate that in larger districts where I work, where you have the same installation of technology across many schools, but different things are happening. And some schools are doing amazing things, and you ask the people supporting those schools, what's the difference? You almost always hear it's the principal in the school that has the most innovation. Their ability to role model, their ability to support innovation, their ability to create a culture that values new ideas. Role of the principal, absolutely paramount.
So as we talk about this transformation of schools where we're making students globally competitive, obviously the principals need to be the catalysts, right, and the supporters for making this happen.
Yes.
Are any principals, have you seen any examples where some principals are doing good things?
Yes, I have a colleague just outside of Oklahoma City, Michelle Anderson, principal of an elementary school there. And one day, Michelle gets email from England asking about tornadoes. They happen to be right in the middle of Tornado Alley.
Whoa.
And the person doing the search, the educator in England, found their elementary school at the top when she typed in Tornado Alley and education. And so it started with, frankly, an outreach from England, which is not surprising. And the elementary teacher got a class involved and then realized that those kids worked harder to produce a video for a tornado drill, by the way, which they then presented in England over the net and explained all of that. And because she's never seen her kids work harder than for this authentic audience of children in England, she challenged every teacher in her school to find educators around the world who can connect to their curriculum.
Wow.
When the teachers identified the countries, that was their job, and all elementary teachers in that school were focused on 4 or 5 different countries as a routine, Michelle took it upon herself to go find the links. She learned how to do this. And so now you have an elementary principal who sees part of her job as building international connections for all her teachers. Now, that's not to take anything away from her teacher's skill set, who could have done the same thing, but her teachers are so busy.
Right.
Time is the most valuable asset for a teacher. And so in the interest of time management of her classrooms, the interest of, again, the principal being the leader, she's the one that made it all happen. And not only that, but she's written grants. Teachers from her district have been flown to England. Really? 3 of them, I think, so far. And so even in a time like this, you have an elementary principal who can connect teachers globally and write the grants to get them on airplanes so they really understand the difference of culture.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point, because right now the economy is so rough. Teachers are just worried about keeping their jobs, and yet we have this compelling need to transform education for this globally competitive world. What are some models, thinking of doing more with less, increasing productivity and efficiency, doing what Michelle has done and scaling it? What would you recommend to principals?
Well, I do think we have to help principals role model within their own work, using collaborative tools to harness the knowledge of a faculty, collaborative word processing for teachers to share knowledge, community-based websites like a Ning where teachers can share videos they've seen in discussion forums. So building community would be one of the very first things that I would hope would start to be embedded in preparing principals. Mm-hmm. Obviously, right now, it's probably left out of a lot of college curriculum.
Right.
So you really have to look at our universities who are preparing principals to see what they're doing. And luckily, a number are moving, but more need to. The other opportunity, I think, is states' certification is going to have to change. We're going to have to change state certification for licensing for principals to include some of these skills. That will create the conditions for the universities to change their curriculum. In the meantime, until the universities and the states catch up with the kind of leadership skills we really need our principals to have, it's just incumbent upon individual principals to develop some of these skills. The other is taking an innovation. I mean, one of the, I think, opportunities of a principal is to be a person who is scanning for ideas.
Right.
Meeting with other principals, reading widely, maybe going to some conferences if they still have the budget to do that. And just an opportunity to gather ideas and to sort out how do you support one teacher first, build success, and then from that one teacher, expand the process. Because we're not going to do everything at once.
And those things that you're just talking about have always been those the skills that a good principal would have. Yeah. I think what's different is the social media that's now available, Alan. And in some ways very exciting, and in some ways a little nervous, how do you deal with the privacy, the security, et cetera. But I think the opportunity is there. Let's go back to, you were talking about policy. There's state and the ESEA reauthorization.
Yes.
So how can we influence this, Alan, to make this reflect what you see and I see as the need?
The policy level is absolutely essential, Jenny. And in many ways, a lot of educators are insulated from policy, just, in their own classroom. Who deals with policy at the state level? But it turns out to be quite important. One of my clients is the state of New Jersey. New Jersey has just gone through all the standards across different disciplines and abolished half of them.
Really?
Because teachers were complaining that it took all year to get through the nitty-gritty detail of standards, and it left no room for the creativity of a teacher. So New Jersey listened, and in the new administration, you can ask for waivers like this, and it was granted, and New Jersey replaced half the standards across every discipline with one new standard, digital citizenship. So the state of New Jersey has hundreds of workshops across the state for principals, superintendents, curriculum directors, and teachers to learn how to embed things like global empathy into the curriculum. That's what it's going to take for this country. We're going to have every single state come to grips with an understanding that something like digital citizenship, the globally connected, information-savvy student who is self-directed and knows how to make a contribution to society at a high level, is an essential new standard.
Wow. That is, incredibly compelling. And I wish we had more time. I could go into this for hours and hours, but we're coming up near the end. You run an annual conference.
Oh, thanks, Jenny.
But I absolutely think it's, very commendable that you take the leadership to do this. And it is on international issues, and it is on leadership.
It is.
So what are you doing this year on your conference? And that it's going to be in Boston. So
it's in Boston
what's your
in July.
So what's your theme this year?
People can check out the website, novemberlearning.com. This year, we have a very unusual set of keynotes. I always try to find people who are just at the edge or even outside of education to give us ideas. So one of our keynotes is a woman who actually works in Geneva for the Economic Forum, who was Barack Obama's media campaign designer. So she figured out Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, instant messaging, apps for the iPhone. She's also been a researcher for Don Tapscott, who wrote Growing Up Digital. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Barack Obama was on every channel, that he was able to get his message out in an organized way across all the web channels, she's going to bring those ideas for education. Imagine if we were using more channels in education. Then Michael Wesch, the anthropologist, will be there. I don't know if you've ever seen his YouTube videos, but they are a riot on the rise of things like YouTube and the culture of youth and how many people are publishing and how people make meaning together. Michael Wesch is absolutely brilliant. Then we have Mitch Resnick from the MIT Media Lab, who's invented Scratch,
right,
which is a free download. I encourage every elementary school to download Scratch, and computer science through high school. And Mitch has had this website where 1,500 Scratch inventions, that's 1 a minute, 7 days a week, are put back up on the MIT website. So Mitch's understanding of how young children connect and share knowledge and even outsource design to one another is probably closer to the realities of the global economy than anything else I know.
Excellent. So, Alan, thank you so much for your time today. And you can learn a lot more about Alan when you go to GETideas.org, which is supported by Cisco, but it is an independent site that features fabulous leaders like Alan around the world discussing education topics. We'd like to thank you for joining us today for our education discussions with Alan November specifically. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, all of you, and have a great day.